You have put so much thought and energy into a trust and how you are going to protect your loved ones and your beneficiaries in the future once you pass away. But what about when you're still living? Do you have anything in place to protect yourself and your assets when you start to fade away? Find out what we have put together with Financial Enhancement Group and Financial Trust Services so we can mitigate those risks and really protect you while you're still living. Hello and welcome to Consider This Program. I'm your host, Jamie Burton, and I'm so excited to have today with us Tom Hurley. He has been working with Financial Enhancement Group to come up with what is called the Financial Enhancement Trust Services. Tom has been working with our managing partner, Joseph Clark, to come up with this new service that we're going to offer to people with a trust division that is so different than anything that we have seen in trusts before. We have seen a problem with the families that we take care of, that they have this need that the trusts that are out right now just cannot take care of. So Tom is here today to talk to us about what we have come up with the Financial Enhancement Trust Services, how we're going to be able to help families going forward, and why it is so important. Thanks so much, Tom, for being here today.
Thank you, Jamie. It's great to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you have been working with Joe Clark with and what you have come up with for the Financial Enhancement Trust Services?
Absolutely, Jamie. Joe approached me several months ago and brought to me a problem about what he has termed incremental incapacitation. And that is, most people don't just pass away. They fade away over time. And that could be for any of a variety of medical situations. But the fact of the matter is, we don't just crash. We end up slowly fading away over time. So how do we protect ourselves? We always think about protecting our assets, protecting our investments through using market strategies or through using other devices such as that, or tax planning strategies. But how do we protect our assets from our future selves? The reality is we all need to face the reality that we are going to age. And as we age, our capabilities are going to diminish. We have developed and are in the process of continuing to develop what I'm calling revolutionary trust asset protection. And that is combating this incremental incapacitation. I'm excited to launch that. But right now, I just kind of want to talk about the general situation of incremental incapacitation. What questions, if any, do you have, Jamie?
Yeah, so when you're looking at incremental incapacitation, that's something that's never been in trusts before, because when you're setting up a trust, you're typically thinking about your beneficiaries. How can you leave money in the best way to the beneficiaries that's going to protect them, that's going to protect your assets, and really help them going forward? This is really an idea that is to help the person creating the trust and help them so they're not going through all of these assets or spending all these assets when they're still living, when they're in a mindset that no longer makes sense for them to be making certain situations. It's there to protect them against themselves. So what is the incremental incapacitation? What does it look like inside of a trust, and how are these people protecting themselves with this new kind of trust document?
Yeah, certainly. A trustee has a lot of responsibilities and a lot of duties. And a trust protector has, which is another person, they have a lot of responsibilities and a lot of duties. But most people set themselves up as the initial trustee. They are the trustee for their trust. They are handling their affairs. They are managing their affairs. My experience has been that as people get into some medical or physical issues, doctors are very, very hesitant to sign off saying this person is incapacitated, unless it's a situation where somebody's in a coma for an extended period of time, or there is a diagnosis of a severe Alzheimer's type onset. Most of the time, the doctors and physicians just don't want to get into the realm of determining whether somebody has the ability or doesn't have the ability to take care of their affairs. So we are putting together what I've called a self-preservation clause. Essentially, the person who creates the trust, who is also the trustee of their revocable trust, will establish a check. I call it a checklist, but it's really a test. It's a test with questions that they will design, that we will assist them in designing. And then this test will determine how much control they have over their assets going forward. So if, for instance, I put together a test and at age 65, maybe it's time for me to start taking that test. Or maybe someone that's close to me says, hey, Tom, you're not doing so well. Maybe it's time for you to take the test that you established. So the test is going to be 50 questions. And if I do well on that test, let's say I get 45 out of 50, then I continue to have full control over my assets. But let's say I don't do as well. Let's say I get 40 out of 50. Well, I'm still in decent shape, but should I have full control over all of my assets, or should that be scaled back a little bit to protect me from my future self? I'm probably making it sound easier than it is, but the fact of the matter is there's going to be a lot of controls along the way that will determine when it's time to take the test and then how much control you will have over your assets. The great thing about this is it is not a one size fits all solution. Different people are going to have different questions on their test, but also they are going to have different, what I'm going to call step downs. Some people may have 2 or 3 step down levels. Others may have 4 or 5 step down levels. It just depends upon what makes sense for the individual. And that's what we're going to help them with. We're going to help them design the test. They're going to give us the answer key, obviously, and then the promises that they will not keep those answers, because really it is a device that is to help you. It is to protect you in a way that no other trust provision that I've ever seen or come across has ever protected a trustee or a settlor, the person who creates the trust. So we are protecting you from that incremental incapacitation that is becoming a very, very common occurrence as the population ages.
It is so common. It's something that we see with our families more and more that we take care of going forward. And what we know is that that incremental incapacitation, it happens over time. It's one thing, then another thing, and another thing. It doesn't just happen all at once. So when Joe was talking to us about creating this division to create this trust services, he's, if I forget to pay the bills for a couple months, then yeah, I should probably start losing some privileges, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to decide that I want to go to Florida for a couple months over the winter. So just because you start to slip doesn't mean that you should just all of a sudden have no control over your life, no control over your finances, and have no set plan in place to be able to say, hey, this is how this should happen. So that the whole incremental incapacitation, it's so important. It's so important for the people that we take care of. And on the flip side, we've had people that have $3 million that they have saved up that should last them like the rest of their lifetime, and they should be able to pass that on to their beneficiaries, their loved ones. But because they start slipping and they start making these decisions and nothing's in place to protect them against those decisions, they blow through that money, and the next thing you know, it's just gone, and there's nothing that anybody can do because nothing was set up for them. So who makes the most sense to have something like this inside of a trust?
Realistically, anyone who has a trust that is concerned about their future well-being should take a long, hard look at this. And let me address a couple of the points that you raised. Frequently, a decision for a child with a parent, when do we take the car keys away from mom or dad? Mm-hmm. That's incredibly difficult. And we don't want to put the child or who's probably a future trustee into that situation. It should be very, very objective, not a subjective situation. So the test is exactly that. It is objective. And you, the creator or grantor of the trust, establish the questions, you establish the step down levels, and then you establish when it's time to start taking away some of that control. So it's not a situation where it's all or nothing, because that's what the way it is set up today in almost all trust. If a doctor says I'm not okay, then I lose all control. So that's taking away the car keys, and that's what we're trying to avoid. going to something else you said about, you see families, you see individuals who have a trust and they just blow through their money. I have an experience in criminal law as both a prosecutor and a public defender. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen what I call elder abuse. And I don't mean physical abuse, but the elderly being taken advantage of financially. It's a problem that is so severe that the Secretary of State's office, the Attorney General's office for most states have their own task force in place to protect seniors from unscrupulous. A lot of it is home contractors. A lot of it is you wouldn't believe the number of people that are willing to come and take down a tree in your yard, and they get money up front and then they never show back up. So we're talking about protection from all sorts of people. But also the biggest thing is we're protecting you from yourself. If you start making decisions that go against long held views, or if you have certain charitable things that are important to you, and all of a sudden you move away from those. As we age, we are looking to make sure that your wishes remain intact and that it doesn't turn into a situation where you run into an unscrupulous individual or an unscrupulous, it might even be a relative. But the idea is to, whatever you've put in place, it remains there. And then if you have a situation where you're not as capable as you once were, you are fully protected and you dictate those terms. So when I use the word revolutionary, I don't use that word lightly. This is something that we've never seen in the trust industry before. And it is completely objective, where before we've always had subjectivity. Does a son or a daughter think I'm okay? Does a doctor think I'm okay? Here, you determine when it's time to slowly lose control and ultimately surrender control of your assets to somebody else who can take better care of your assets, and so you can continue to live your life to the fullest.
Absolutely. And like you said, this is so revolutionary and is something that can make or break your future and the future of your family. If you want to talk more about this, please reach out to us, 800-928-4001, or visit us at yourlifeafterwork.com.